last project reminds me of, you guys might get a kick out of this. I had to, as head teacher of the math department, I had to go and talk to incoming parents about things they need to consider with their students when they arrive at high school. And I led off by asking them if they were ready to sing. We were going to sing something first. And you should have seen the people cringing in the audience. Now, the reason I brought that up was because I wanted to remind them to pick the right level, because there's some people getting ready to do their voice exercises they've practiced since birth, and there's others looking for the exits. So if you're not at the right level, you could imagine how much that's going to affect you, and you can see it with things like absenteeism and lateness and other things we've talked about today. So our last presenter is Danielle O'Keefe, and she's going to be talking about leveling and its effect on high school or just school?
High school.
High school,
Yeah.
okay. Danielle O'Keefe.
Everybody. Okay, so Danielle O'Keefe, I teach English and drama at North, and I'm the only one standing between you all and some lunch, so I will try not to babble on. So I'm going to be talking about ability grouping today. When I say ability grouping, what I'm talking about is the leveling structure that we have here in the Nashua School District, starting from 6th grade and heading up to 12th grade. So that's your foundations, extensions, honors. So that's what I'm referring to. So the major benefit to having a structure like this is essentially it's built-in targeted differentiation. So when you teach 30 kids in a class, like many of us do, having them sorted out by skill level is incredibly helpful in allowing for teachers to really target their instruction to what a particular group of students actually needs. So that's, I believe, the major purpose of having a structure like this in place. It is by no means limited to Nashua. It's used widely across the country and around the world. But there are some issues that have been cited in scholarly articles and some of the literature around this that I'm going to mention in a moment. In the transitional document for 6th graders for our district, it cites that really key elements to this are using both qualitative and quantitative data to decide where kids are going to go, and also having that be flexible. So as kids improve their skills as they go along, there is room to move from level to level. Whether or not we do that at the middle school level, I'm actually not sure. I looked into primarily what's going on in high school, but ideally that's what we should be seeing. So in looking at the literature about ability grouping, one of the major problems that occurs is that we frequently see the honors level students, the high level students just taking off and flying, and then the students who are at the bottom level, the lower skilled students, are just getting left further and further behind when it's not implemented correctly. So it should be that targeted differentiation if we're getting kids where they're supposed to be according to their actual skills. But when we're not implementing it correctly, then we run into this even greater widening of the gap, greater disparity between the kids who are successful and the kids who are struggling. So the issue that I identified, at least at the high school level, particularly at North, is that we frequently see students who are misplaced in levels according to their skills. I know this just from my experience here, from just what I see in my classroom every semester, and then I also have talked to many colleagues over my time here as well who find this to be the case. I did throw out a survey to the staff just to get a pulse on that, just to make sure that it was actually widespread, or to see if I was off about that and needed to reframe something. What I got back was that 70% of respondents found that over 10% of their students in their classes in a given semester are likely misplaced based on skill. About 20% of the respondents said over 30% of their kids seem to be misplaced in their classes. And in a school as big as ours, that's a lot of kids that aren't necessarily in the spot where they're supposed to be, where they can get the most effective targeted instruction for them. So a few of the reasons that we see, it appears to be often based more on parental or student desire where students are placed in their classes rather than their actual ability level, what they can actually do. So in our system in X2, parents and students at course selection, they can really click what they want in terms of level. They can, regardless of teacher recommendation, they can put themselves where they'd like to put themselves much of the time. Oftentimes it appears to be based on behavior rather than ability level. So what I've seen many, many times, especially in 9th grade English, which is what I mostly teach, I've got a lot of really nice kids in my honors level classes who don't necessarily have those skills to be able to have a truly accelerated class and to keep everybody moving forward. On the other end, I've got kids absolutely reading at grade level who are good writers in foundations classes who, regardless of how much more work I try to give them to keep them busy when they finish up before I'm able to get the students who actually need that help where they need to be, by that point they're distracting the rest of the class, and we're seeing behavioral problems compound themselves at the lower level because it's almost like they're being loaded into one spot, and that's not helpful. It can result in reporting on transcripts that doesn't accurately reflect student skills as well. Students earn a bit more credit in their GPA depending on the level of course that they have. So if I don't have students who are able to perform at an honors level and perform honors work in my honors class, and so we have to slow things down because that's where we are, that's not necessarily what's being reflected in their GPAs when we get to that point. So these are all of the problems with not having kids in the spots where they're supposed to be. So from what I've gathered, I reached out to to the middle school principals and tried to gather what's our process, how do we do this? According to the documentation we have, this is the idea. I'm sure that it varies based on a variety of factors when we actually try to implement it. But students come into the 6th grade, they're heterogeneously grouped, and then I believe by October they're sorted into 3 levels. And this is based, like we said before, both on qualitative, quantitative data, input from parents and teachers. And then 7th and 8th grade, mainly academic performance, and test scores are used. Parents can still impact the placement of their students. At the high school level, students, at least at first, they tend to continue on the track that they were primarily on in middle school for the most part. And then we can recommend their level, at least semester 1. We actually only recommend directly in our system during semester 1 at this point, just because of creating the schedule and some complexities with that. But parents and students can still make that shift as they see fit. So one thing I ask myself is, what does this even mean? What do our levels even mean in terms of honors, extensions, and foundations? So in thinking about that, if I hear an honors course, I'm thinking an accelerated course of study that goes beyond what we think your average student in a grade level should do. For me, as an English teacher, so this moving forward, this really just has to do with English specifically, but it could be adjusted and shifted to apply to other subjects as well. As an English teacher, that probably means kids that are reading above grade level, or some kids who are reading at grade level but have shown exceptional writing skills or are exceptionally driven, and maybe we want to push them a little bit further, and then they will raise their skill levels moving forward. Extensions, they're doing what you expect them to do. If we're talking about 9th grade, they're coming in with those grade level skills. This would be appropriate, I think, mostly for students reading at grade level or even up to a year below, because if you're getting instruction right around where your grade level is and your reading level is, you'll be able to move that up relatively quickly. Foundations, they don't have some of those foundational skills. They need more support in building that base that they need. What this shouldn't look like, by the way, is honors students writing, 5 major papers in a semester and foundation students doing worksheets. It should not look like that at all. Perhaps more foundation students are writing 3 essays and we're breaking it down into pieces and giving them more support. So students should be able to get to that same spot or a similar spot, but with just different supports in place for it. I would argue that this is probably appropriate for students reading 2 or more grade levels below where they are. So I wanted to see how this shook down for this year's ninth grade class at North. So this year's sections of English 1 that we had for our ninth graders as they came in. We had 8 sections of honors, 6 sections of extensions, 4 sections of foundations for our kids. When I looked at where they were reading, so their end of 8th grade reading levels when we created these sections, we got 51 kids reading above grade level, 137 mid to late 8th grade, 164 a year below, and 88 were 2 or more years below. By the way, for our course sections, for our cap for extensions and honors is 31 students, and our cap for foundations is 22 at this point. So if we're going by the divisions that I laid out previously, if we're going to go along with that, and please just bear with me and do for argument's sake, we should have been looking at 2 sections of honors, 8 to 11 of extensions, which makes sense. That's grade level work, and 4 to 5 sections of foundations if we were going to have it accurately reflect where students were reading and what level where they actually were. All right, so what? So if we're going to actually benefit from our leveling system, if we're actually going to benefit from ability grouping, we need to make sure that we actually have kids in our classes that are where their class designation says that they are in terms of skill, at least for the most part. And right now, at least at the extensions and honors level, it seems to be wildly off, at least from the data from this past year. So 2 things we need to do. We need to make sure that students are appropriately placed heading into high school. That's a huge year. 9th grade, for students who maybe struggled in middle school, I mean, that's an opportunity to turn over a new leaf. So I have kids in my foundations class right now. I've got a kid reading above grade level, but is clowning around a whole lot, making bad grades, and perhaps if that student, it's just anecdotal, but perhaps if that student had been placed where his reading level suggests, or at least in an extensions class, he would have an opportunity to change something and make a better path for himself moving forward. As it is, he's started off in rough shape for 9th grade. So if we can handle that issue, I think that issue alone would solve a lot of it. And make sure that there's a procedure in place for students to continue semester by semester in high school, to be put in the right spot, to move as necessary based on how they're performing in their classes. So proposal for the first piece, I would like to see, and actually I'm gonna add a piece to this from the writing intervention presentation, the cornerstone as well. So not just their reading, but their writing. If we've got hard data on both of those pieces, making sure that that's probably the first thing that we're looking at is actually their skill-based data in where we're going to put them when we first create these classes. Then their 8th grade teachers could perhaps look at those sections and really look at the individual kids and say, okay, where is that student who maybe he tested in low 8th grade, but he writes a heck of a paper and his discussion's on point, let's move him ahead. And so there is a place for those that qualitative data, those teacher observations to come into play. So that's what I would suggest for that piece. Once they're in high school, so assuming they're appropriately placed at that point, I'd love to find a way, and I don't know how we can do this, but where teachers could make a recommendation each semester for the following course in their subject in terms of level. Parents and students should still have some say over where they go in terms of leveling, because there are times where there's a piece that's missing that perhaps the school is not gathering, not picking up on. But if they wish to do that, I think it needs to be there needs to be more thought that goes into it besides the clicking of a button. So perhaps submitting a form to meet with the teacher, meet with guidance, and have that conversation. Why do I think my child should go into this spot? And the teacher can either, say, you know what, you're actually right, and reconsider, or come with the evidence or papers or whatever it may be to back up their decision. to have that conversation. So at least it's been had before a change gets made, and there needs to be consideration there. So those are my recommendations. The desired results, I think, from this is that, one, most importantly, the whole reason to have leveling in the first place is that teachers can accurately target their instruction to the groups that they have in front of them. And students may also have more incentive to take ownership over their own academic growth if they know that they're really going to be held accountable to their actual skills. Questions?
It's not really a question as much as a comment. Two comments. First of all, really nice job, Danielle.
No, thanks.
I hope this is a continuing conversation that we have, and I hope another piece of it is that we look at how we place our ELL students, because ELL students traditionally are immediately kind of shifted down into the foundational level, where their ability level is not always that, oftentimes is not, but just because they're learning language does not mean that's where their ability level is, and I hope that's part of our conversation too. Great job, though.
Yeah, thanks. Yep.
I feel like that the middle school definitely has to be part of that conversation, because I think that's where we're just, the gap is widening between the foundations and the honors, because people are misplaced, they're trapped, we're, because of the lack of UA classes, we're unable to have a student who might be in a higher level math or science class and a lower level. We're unable to place them where they have to be in one level.
And just, but we have more flexibility with that at the high school. They can do that,
Right.
but if they've always been in that, it's really hard for them to shake
Right.
that once they've
Right.
already been
So
put there.
So they're trapped.
Yeah.
So then they have this mindset that this is where they're at, right? And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the parent piece is key at the middle school. It definitely, the hand goes in there way more than it should as far as not looking at the academics. So definitely, we were interested in also looking at that topic. It's definitely a conversation that I hope we can continue having. Thank you, that was a great job.
Yeah.
And kind of to go off what Denise said, first, yes, thank you, because this is something that gets me like,
Yeah.
I'm at the high school this year, but I was at one of the middle schools for 5 years, and we had parents in meetings say, I want my child in honors because the students behave better. I know they will struggle. And what I think they don't understand is that that's to the detriment not only of the student, but when everyone does that, and so many people are misplaced. One, you're not really teaching an honors class. You know, I mean, I'm not. I end up teaching down to the 8 that are struggling the most. And also when people are placed appropriately, you won't see this big behavior issue when they're really placed more by academics than by who acts out. So I don't know, I just love that you did this, because I definitely think it's something that I wish kind of teachers' professionalism was respected more when making these calls on students.
Yeah, and with that parent piece, I mean, where we stand right now, they're not wrong. If they
No,
put,
that's what I mean.
and so we
Following
need, the whole
this
system needs
model
to, yeah.
would make that, would correct that, you know,
Yeah.
to some degree, so, yeah.
Danielle, that was a great job. The most powerful piece that I saw was the data that you showed, what the sections we should have and what we have. And we drive the master schedule based on the sign-up. And that's how those sections are generated versus setting up based on our testing and then putting the kids in. I'd love to see you share that with guidance.
Yep,
This will sound barbaric, but
great, love it.
when I was in middle school and it was public, this was Lowell, they had 7 sections in junior high, so, well, 6, they ended up 6. We were either in 7-6, the mouth breathers, or 7-1, the elite. And I remember thinking it was terrible then, but you went up or down depending on how well you did. And there was some wisdom in that.
Mhm.
Because I can remember I was placed in 7-3 and was quite humiliated, and went up to 8-1 and was very proud of myself. But it was very fluid, and it was based, they did behavior and academics, but it's not saying I want to go back to that system. But you had to earn where you were or sing to where you were. And there's something to be said for that. It's very similar in some ways to what you're talking about.
It's nice that you're looking at the iReady scores, because as a middle school teacher, we tell the students, these scores matter. This is what is going to help you, to help high school decide. But if the high school can't use those to decide, then maybe our message isn't honest. But that is the message we send, and we really help them, and we encourage them to do their best and be proud of what they've done and look at their growth and pull apart their scores, and then to see where they can improve. So it would be great if we were totally accurate in what we say.
And when Sharon sets up the intervention program for our at-risk kids, we look at all that data, and it's amazing when we look at their scores and their performances and the issues that we're dealing with in high school, is that a lot of them are placed lower, and we're wondering if it is behavioral. It's always behavioral.
And because, you know, the schedule won't allow it. Who cares about the schedule? It's all about the kid. Make it work.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, our kids take 8 standardized tests in 8th grade alone, and if we're not using that data, why are we doing
The
this?
heck, yeah.
Why are we subjecting the kids to so many standardized tests? I mean, it's a real crime not to use it.
Question?